2020, the unknown future rolls towards us, and now more than ever, I cannot understand why. Why is the iPad Pro 2018 so slow at copying files to external drives? Oh, sorry, Dark Fate was so much worse than T2. But anyways, I've got the SanDisk Extreme Pro card here. It's the CF, 160 megabytes a second, both ways. That's the max spec, of course, but it's capable of sustaining at least 100 megabyte writes throughout the capacity, so it should be fine. Now it's connected to Kingston FCR HS4 reader, which is also capable of, well, basically full USB 3 speeds. This in turn is connected to an Apple USB-C to USB-A dongle, which is also capable of super fast transfers. I've observed at least 450 megabytes a second while connected to a MacBook and an external SSD drive, which should give us more than enough headroom to deal with speeds that we are seeing here. As you can see, we're already past a reasonable time to copy 500 megabytes. I mean, unless someone might think we're still living in the 90s. Well, at this point, I believe that any on-location backup scenario is a complete disaster. You know, for working photographers, videographers, or whoever really who would like to copy data from the iPad to external media. To me personally, this is the biggest problem with the iPad, or rather iOS, as I observe this behavior only with external media, that is hard drives, SSDs, pen drive, SD cards, CF cards, and no matter the file system, exFAT, APFS, macOS Extended, etc. They all show the same behavior. And by the way, we still haven't finished copying our 500 megabytes. So maybe now, are we there yet? No. One more second and even more. Oh yeah, there we are. 5 megabytes per second. That is, if I'm not mistaken, slower than the original iPod. So now let's see what's the speed of that card when connected to a MacBook. And yes, we're done. So it took about 5 seconds, which translates to roughly 100 megabytes a second, which is what I would expect. And yeah, what I expected from the iPad. So let's give it another go. Why not? Let's just speed things a bit so that you don't have to wait all this time. And yeah, same thing. And for all you dongle lovers, I have prepared a little treat to check if it's not the Apple dongle that's bottlenecking everything. So what we've got here is a little USB-A to USB-C dongle that I got off, I think, of Amazon. That is connected then to the exact same setup that the iPad was connected to. And now let's check if we've got the right card, and let's give this benchmark a go. Yeah. And yes, almost 100. Yeah, so it's not the dongle, but let's give it another go. I need that 100. And yeah. So let's try an SD card then. It's a relatively fast Sony SDXC2. It can go up to 150 megs write speeds, and you could see that we briefly got there. So now let's try to copy the file, and yep, that's it. So let's see if the same thing happens on an iPad. By the way, I've noticed a little glitch in the UI of iOS. Namely, when you copy a file, in a window arrangement of the Files app like this, you don't get the progress bar, or rather the progress circle, when you do that. To make it appear, you have to change the view of that window. And there it is. Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. And wow, that's a 50% improvement, to use Apple language. But let's try the other way around. So now we're copying from the SD card to the iPad. Wow, that's actually what I would expect. And now, just for fun, let's connect a standard spinning hard drive that is filled to about 70% of its capacity. It's a 2 terabyte drive. And we're in fast forward mode, and you can see why. I will leave that without comments. Still, that is not every time that I get this kind of super poor performance. Normally you'd get something, I would say, in the range of 5 to 10 megabytes when you copy files from the iPad to external media. Now, all transfer tests presented in this video were performed on iOS 13.4. The funny thing is that the limitation seems to be software imposed and not hardware, because when you back up your iPad to your Mac, then the speed seems okay at about 70 megabytes a second. Considering you've got a whole bunch of small files, that's acceptable. What is not acceptable, though, is the reliability of the Files app. Every once in a while I would get a card error upon reconnecting the card, or in fact any other media formatted to exFAT. I experienced the same thing with a hard drive and a pen drive some time ago. Basically, the Files app suddenly becomes unresponsive and reports weird file sizes, while also reporting other files as missing or broken. Any files copied during such a glitch are basically unreadable on any device. To sum up, today we've seen staggering 5 to 7.5 megabytes a second file transfer speeds from the iPad to external media, all with a 500 megabyte zip file. However, importing the same file from a fast SD card yielded around 113 megabytes a second. That said, during almost a year with this iPad, I've seen widely varying speeds. The maximum I managed to squeeze out of it was just shy of 150 megabytes a second, but only when connected to an external SSD. When importing raw photo files, on average about 35 megabytes each, I usually get around 70 to 90 megabytes per second, which is not good for what those cards are capable of, but not terrible either. Again, the abysmal USB 1 level speeds of about 5 to 10 megabytes a second only happen when one tries to copy files from the iPad to external drives, cards, etc., using the Files app, or in general iOS, which in my opinion is still holding the iPad back. And now a few kind words from my friend Carl.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe or I'll be forced to terminate this iPad immediately. Also, I need a new vehicle.